Well, today in Gaza, Hamas released the remains of 4 hostages kidnapped during the October 7th terror attack. So this is the first time that Hamas has returned the remains of deceased hostages under the current Gaza ceasefire. The militant group says they include a mother and her 2 young children and an 83-year-old journalist. All of them had been feared dead.
Hamas militants handing over 4 coffins to the Red Cross in front of hundreds of people in southern Gaza. The UN Human Rights Office later condemned the ceremony, saying the parading of the caskets was abhorrent and cruel and violated international laws. Hamas says they contained the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages who died in captivity, including the youngest of more than 250 Israelis abducted into Gaza on October 7th, 2023. Kfir Bibas was 8.5 months old when he was kidnapped from the kibbutz of Nir Oz, along with his 32-year-old mother Shiri and brother Ariel, who was 4. The father of the family was released earlier this month as part of the truce. The 4th hostage is said to be Oded Lifshitz, who was 83 when he was seized. In Israel, people lined up along roads as the coffins were driven to Tel Aviv and taken to the National Forensic Institute to be formally identified. Nearby, at the so-called Hostages Square, hundreds gathered. It has become a place of regular demonstrations for the release of those held by Hamas. People here united by grief.
Horrible feeling, really terrible feeling. We've waited such a long time for good news. As a mother of a small child, it breaks my heart. I can't even explain the level of cruelty to do this to a mother and 2 small children. It's just, there are no words.
This day, especially because of the children, the small children. We are such a people. We care about everybody. Even if I didn't know them, I care about them.
Hamas claims the 4 hostages returned on Thursday were killed in Israeli airstrikes. Israel has not confirmed this. Thursday marked the first handover of bodies to Israel during this ceasefire, with many here worried the fragile truce may collapse before all hostages, dead or alive, are brought back.
I spoke earlier with our senior international correspondent, Fanny Fichar, in Tel Aviv. I asked her about Israeli reaction to the handover of those remains.
Yes, Brian, this day weighs really heavily here on people in Israel, but especially you can see displayed here at Hostages Square, where you see people hugging each other, trying to support each other, crying. And obviously this is not the day when people want to talk about politics, but the ones who did talk about politics, when we asked them about the meaning of today, they also said that they're angry, and they expressed that anger towards the right-wing coalition government, blaming Prime Minister Netanyahu that he didn't do enough to make sure that the 4 bodies who were released today, that they are returning home alive. So definitely a mix of anger, but also a lot of sorrow, a lot of grief that you see here displayed. Most of the music that's being played is when you listen to the lyrics, is about suffering, and it is about missing people. Now, what we know so far, that one of the 4 hostages who's been released today has been identified as Mr. Lifshitz. Now, just like his wife, he was a peace activist, and in fact, he was known for basically bringing people from Gaza to here to Israel for medical help. His wife was released alive just a few weeks into the abduction, but now it's clear, it's a fact that her husband didn't make it out of alive.
And with this tragic backdrop, we're reminded that all of this is happening, Fanny, as part of an ongoing ceasefire process. What are the next steps in this process, and what could be the obstacles moving forward?
Well, right now, the first phase of the ceasefire is still ongoing, but obviously negotiations for the second phase were to begin already 2 weeks ago, and that did not happen. What we're hearing is that the negotiations, the indirect talks between Hamas militants and Israel are supposed to start this week, but it's quite tricky if you look at the elements, because the second phase would include a complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza and also find an answer to the question who is going to administer Gaza Strip. Now, all of this is happening against the backdrop of what Donald Trump said, the US president, 2 weeks ago about the future of the Gaza Strip. And we've heard him saying that he wants to turn it into a Riviera of the Middle East without Palestinians. So obviously it's not just about whether Hamas militants and Israel can agree through mediators, but about all the stakeholders all around that can certainly jeopardize moving forward. Nonetheless, there's hope here also at the square, because people also say, look, at least the ceasefire is still holding, and we hope that the government is going to stick to the plan, make sure that all hostages are released.
And the United Nations, Funny, has denounced what we saw today, Hamas's display of the hostages' coffins. What kind of message is Hamas trying to send with this?
Hamas militants, just like they did previously when hostages were released alive, in fact, want to show that they're in charge, that they're in charge in the Gaza Strip. But they also materialized one of the biggest fears of people here in Israel, and that is that they're going to politicize the people who they are releasing, including dead bodies. Now, the United Nations human rights officer made it very, very clear that this is very abhorrent, very abhorrent, very cruel, that even the dead bodies couldn't leave in a dignified way. And this adds, of course, to the anger here on the square of some people who say, why is it that there has to be so much suffering? And this is a question, of course, that a lot of people ask, not only Israelis, but also Palestinians, because we should not forget that part of the deal of releasing hostages, dead or alive, is also to release Palestinians who have been detained massively since October 7th.
DW's Funny Fachar with the latest in Tel Aviv. Funny, thank you.